Well, off the top of the good news of the Dead Space remake actually being pretty damn good, we do have some interesting to mixed news under the Electronic Arts portfolio. A bunch of games have actually been cancelled, the sorts of games that perhaps a lot of us wouldn't really like them to be investing a lot of time and energy into. Unfortunately, though, there was one fairly major casualty over with Respawn, but it does also appear that Respawn have got some pretty damn cool stuff being cooked up right now. So, let's get into it. Number one, Jedi Survivor has been delayed. That's good news, right? It's been delayed from March 17th to April 28th. Overall, they just say that's to hit their quality bar, to provide the team with time, have that little bit of extra polish. Now, you might say, a month? Really? What can you do then? Well, you can actually do quite a lot. As time goes on, the bug list for a game just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And while you are developing a game, yes, you can get many, many bugs, cleared and fixed up. But ultimately, a bunch of optimization and stuff like that does actually happen at the end. Now, sometimes that's because of process. Oftentimes, also that can happen because that's when it makes sense to do the optimizing, because you actually know what you're dealing with in terms of the overall game experience. So this is almost certainly good news for the game. If you think back to, of course, the game that came out before this one, amazing game, it did have some launch quirks. Those didn't really take away from the overall experience in the fullness of time, but obviously they were a pain in the dick at the very start. It's the one thing that let down a game that otherwise wasn't really being let down by anything. Now, if this is 6 super crunchy weeks, then yeah, they could still get a lot done, but the fact that it would have to be super crunchy, that would be the sort of worrying indicator. But overall, Respawn do actually seem to be a comparatively healthy studio as it compares to a lot of other ones. Now, some stuff's been cancelled, right? So we got good news for Jedi Survivor, but over with Apex and Battlefield, we have 2 cancellations. And that's because Apex Legends Mobile is being sunset in 90 days. I mean, I vividly remember that coming out super recently, and that is in spite of it winning Game of the Year 2022 on the Apple Store and the Google Play Store, as if that would matter too much for a game that's operating at this scale. And per their CEO, Andrew Wilson, the gameplay did not translate as well to mobile as they hoped. The game did not retain the casual user base that a title like that would require. The mobile market is hard, and they just did not have the right kind of game for that kind of audience. Now, it's not like this was a big failure. It hit $40 million in lifetime earnings, so, I mean, would it have lost money at that? I'd hope not. I mean, who knows how inflated budgets get. But overall, though, the problem is the direction that the numbers were going in, and the fact that the game didn't really fit the mold. Often we have these situations where, a game is greenlit, and it's being worked on, and that's all good. But by the time the game comes out, more innovation has happened in the market. A perfect example would be, say, COD Mobile. All right, COD Mobile comes out, does super well, it doesn't have the cross progression, but then the Warzone Mobile comes out. And now your Warzone Mobile can sync up with your Warzone progress, you get your cross progression, and that sort of thing is, I suppose, appealing. Obviously, though, not having that here is not particularly great. And if you want to know the very simple fact of why it's going, it's because monthly earnings hit $7 million in May and June of 2022. That's pretty nice. The problem, though, is that instead of gaining momentum, it massively slowed down, with January being 1.4 million. That's a massive decline. That's the all-time low. And if you're pulling in 1.4 million a month, that is amazing for most games, but not something like this. Since they were passing 100,000 daily downloads in August, there's been a steady decline. It's now getting around 40,000 downloads per day on average. That is massive, but I would contend that that more reflects it having a, relatively speaking, low penetration into a market that is absolutely ginormous. Of course, in the game side, not all's perfect. Bit of a content drought, significant bugs, and also not a Respawn game. I think that's pretty damn key. It's not a Respawn game. I mean, it was overseen, right? But it was co-developed with Tencent Lightspeed and Tencent Quantum. Of course, Tencent are pretty heavy in mobile games. You will see them behind, as an example, Call of Duty Mobile. But overall, then, this did mean that they were giving up quite a lot of control on the game, And then you have a situation where if the development's not really working, all your numbers are going down. It basically just doesn't really make sense, especially when the game's different to Apex, right? Like, it has different mechanics. There are different heroes. It's not this game that you can overall buy in a multi-screen way. You take Genshin Impact. That's the same game anywhere you play it. That's massive. Take Warzone Mobile. You have cross-progression. Not having that kind of feature means that Apex, the mobile game, is not able to tap into its existing audience. And I suppose that's the challenging thing then. Rather than being a value add to the existing audience, it ends up trying to hit a market of people who want Apex on the go. But if you're an existing Apex player, I mean, the mobile version's kind of just going to feel like a bad version of the thing that you had, and not having the cross progression, again, in this very extrinsically motivated world of gaming, that's not particularly going to be that strong. So really, just the unique selling points, I think, overall not really being there. And with this going on, that's also why Wilson says that Battlefield Mobile has been cancelled, and that's actually while it has been played. It's been undergoing a soft launch in the Asia-Pacific region. Basically, I mean, this is going to suck for them because this was multiple years of development. It had a suite of features, they say, that players were excited to see, with destruction, vehicles, and a more traditional Battlefield experience, which I would then say, is that really what we're going to be doing on mobile? A traditional Battlefield experience? I mean, I don't know. There's certainly implications there on session length that I'd be a bit concerned about. But yeah, the game was also going to be completely standalone. I mean, not that being tied to 2042 would be the biggest shot in the arm for a game like that, but overall, with soft release happening, then probably not getting great retention numbers, management and direction for the franchise changing after the failure of the launch of 2042, just didn't make sense. That's essentially that. It's a part of a wider shakeup that's happening with the Battlefield franchise, one that has seen Vince Zampella, co-founder of Respawn, EA executive, generally, I think, well-respected, seen as being a very capable and steady hand. They've been trying to revitalize that series and, essentially ensure that Battlefield doesn't end up dying as a brand in the same way that, more bad Mass Effect or more bad Dragon Age would kind of do that to those brands. EA sure are coming out of a really, really damn rough period, aren't they? Of course, what is awkward, though, is like the amount of times that they were propping up to investors the importance of these games, how good Battlefield Mobile is. So undoubtedly quite the L being taken. It's that sort of thing. I mean, if you just trounce out a bunch of this stuff to increase your investor confidence, and then if you don't deliver, well, you are setting yourself up for failure. I suppose that's why a lot of companies do something called sandbagging, where basically they will, they'll be setting earnings expectations and things like that they kind of know they can beat. So, cancellations don't stop, and this is one that honestly does sting. So this is per Jason Schreier's sources at Respawn. In a way, like, this is the system, this is games incubation working as intended. Ultimately, there's only so many things a company can do, but to get into this, there was a single-player first-person shooter set in the Titanfall/Apex universe. Of course, people really like the character, narratives, tone, all of that of Apex, and Titanfall 2 really punched above its weight in terms of its single-player. Like, it had a simple story that it executed well on an emotional level, paired with missions that, generally speaking, always had something to shake up the gameplay experience. It meant that as a single-player campaign, it wasn't boring. I wouldn't say that it was like a 10 out of 10, but it was a real solidly engaging time, and I'd still recommend to anybody to pick up Titanfall 2 just to play that single-player campaign. It really is good. But ultimately then, this project, Titanfall Legends, a fun little merger of their names, I suppose, that's been cancelled. People are being reshuffled around Respawn where possible. There will be severage packages for those who cannot, which is the bit that absolutely does sting. And this is really rough because really the Titanfall community, who wouldn't consider themselves always to be part of Apex, they've been living in hopium, right? I mean, hey, we've had Northstar, we've had a lot of awesome things, we've had a little bit of a resurgence with Titanfall, which I think people have been mega appreciative of, but it's always struggled. It has a skill ceiling so unbelievably high that it can be quite a hard game for new players to approach. And now, like, the thing that could have been the next thing is dead. That's sad. Now, that being said, There's probably a lot of reasons why why this project happened, but then was cancelled. I mean, you know about the game that we're making, The Pale Beyond. I can tell you that, like, before that, we went through a process of, it was like 6 games, and then kind of doing like a vertical slice, or a little bit of a slice of 2, and then a more vertical-ish slice of 1. So we've got like a few projects in IP that are either cancelled / on the back burner. That kind of thing just does end up happening, and a lot of times, it's because of something called opportunity cost, and it's also because of risk management, right? Where you could say, right, the opportunity cost of doing this project's pretty high, and it's also pretty risky. Therefore, it may not be the most responsible thing to do overall. In this case, I think when we actually look at what Respawn's doing, it can kind of make sense there. And I mean, as well, one of the overarching stories has been excitement over a lot of Respawn's development processes being applied to other studios within EA, right? It's been one of the major stories of the last, I'd say, 2 years. Well, this is kind of what that looks like. I would imagine, though, that this is a project that advanced a little bit past that initial stage, of course. But ultimately, yeah, that's that. Sometimes things just don't make it because it ends up making sense, for whatever reason, to do something else. And we will be able to talk about what that something else very well may be. Now, I should also note, this game was not announced. We're just finding out about this because of sources, right? We first heard about this in job listings as a part of an incubation unit at Respawn. Then we got further leaks from Jeff Grubb that said that it was a Titanfall Apex related thing, that the incubation team were working on a single player FPS that was striving for mobility and style as guided principles, but it was not a sequel to Titanfall 1 or 2. People connected the dots, and then when people say via Schreier sources that it's called Titanfall Legends, it completely makes sense. Just that what I've basically been saying is, yes, true, but also not exactly, because Jeff Grubb has actually explained on his stream, as picked up by Video Games Chronicle, I'd say are generally excellent, this was actually meant to be a single-player experience within Apex Legends that felt like Titanfall. Right? So the same way that Apex has had single-player events, Battle Royale, arenas, control modes, things like that, apparently this was part of a plan to turn Apex Legends into a platform where you could get all kinds of shooter experiences from an expanded Apex Legends / Titanfall world. Titanfall Legends was always supposed to slot in as a part of that. It would be a single-player campaign inside that platform in the same way that Call of Duty works, where you get Modern Warfare 2, and there's Warzone as well, and, you know, they all kind of mesh together. Apparently the idea is that it would feature a cast of Apex Legends interacting with the player character of Blisk and the Titan BT. So that is the villain and protagonist from Titanfall 2, with the Legends giving the players appropriate special abilities, right? So basically the pitch was, I mean, it sounds mad, but cool. They want to make John Wick meets Tony Hawk with a bit of Doom Eternal. Yeah, sign me up. That sounds pretty high skill cap, though. Now, a few things. In January 2022, Mohamed Alavi, he left. He was an 11-year Respawn veteran, narrative design director in Apex Legends, senior designer Titanfall, a designer of some very notable Call of Duty missions, actually. No Russian, all gillied up, crew expendable. I mean, you know, right back to COD 4. So he left Respawn, so you lose, and he was the creative director, so you lose a pretty major figure in the project, and I think then there's also the fact, so, you know, losing big creative director, I think that just means, you know, stonks in this go down slightly, but then there's the broader context, right? So Respawn is massive. Number 1, Apex Legends. The live service beast must be fed. Right, at all costs. Also, a premium Star Wars Jedi game roughly every 3 years. Also, a brand new Star Wars first-person shooter. Now, I don't necessarily know if that is exactly shooting. You could have a first-person slasher, like, you know, Jedi Academy and stuff, who knows. But also, they are producing a Star Wars strategy game with BitReactor. They've got scope for some smaller passion projects, I guess, like the Medal of Honor VR game, but I don't think that particularly went anywhere. And, I mean, who knows if there'll be in the same way that, you know, you've now got Warzone Mobile, you do have to wonder, will there be a Apex Mobile that is different to the one that we got? I don't think so. I think there'll be a lot of brand confusion. I'm not really sure how they can make that happen. And essentially having to build a successor to two of their most critically acclaimed games at the same time, while not letting down the fans of either, probably for release of 2025 by the latest. So that's going to be super hard. I mean, if you've got a team making a Star Wars first-person shooter that you are contractually obligated to make, well, what's going to happen? There's like, oh, there's an FPS crew right over there. They're really good. Sometimes opportunity cost is a real bastard. So it's the kind of thing, right? This is really hard to hear. When this goes down, it hopefully should not result in layoffs because, there are more positions being offered to people. But this is a lot of what the process is like at these companies. I'll give you a little bit of I don't want to say a scoop, but I obviously know what's going on with the other companies, games companies that are in the same city that we're in the same region, of Northern Ireland. And just, generally like quite a bit. So, you could be making these smaller budget games, but say our game, The Pale Beyond, if you wanted to make a game with a budget of like between, let's just say 2 and 5 million or 1 and 3 million or something like that, just a way bigger budget. You could maybe spend 200 grand on a vertical slice, maybe even more. And you could actually, you could probably get some funding support to do that from various partners or whatever. And, that is how you would kind of make your big bet. So if it seems like kind of crazy that like 50 people will be working on something like this, actually, no, for some of those projects that are really big bets, you have to develop enough to know whether it's worth greenlighting the thing. And that's really one of the things. Like right now, we have multiple projects we could pitch around after Pale. One or two of them, we need to polish them up and get them there. But those are things that maybe we could have spent, this is roughly off the top of my head, and not like in terms of literal money, but obviously in terms of like wage money, maybe 25, 30, 40 grand on. But it's like, you gotta spend 40 grand on the thing, you've got to put that time and effort onto the thing, knowing that there's an above 50% chance that may not be the thing that you're doing. That's kind of the way that it works. There's a lot of placing bets, managing opportunity cost, feeling things out, working what you can get the deal with, what you can't get the deal with, what will resonate better, what will play test better, the things like that, what'll, have an audience that's like just right. Now, it's obviously different from an indie perspective versus what it'll be here for Respawn, but those are the sorts of things that I would encourage you to think about. Even though it is, we're not getting this game, and that fucking sucks. Believe me, I think it sucks. I enjoyed Titanfall 1 a lot, though I didn't find that it had staying power. I thought that Titanfall 2 was an absolute god-tier video game. Truly a beautiful game. So it really does suck to me. But ultimately, I would encourage you to think about how these things could literally work at a company. And in many cases, it's less about taking the thing away from you and me, and it's more about trying to divert resources in such a way that makes sense. My opinion, though, is that this has got to happen in a way where the employees are not, sold down the river, right? Where employees are not misled as to what their prospects are. So that's why, for me, the one red flag here is the idea that there could be a severance package. Obviously that's good. That if somebody is going, they get a severance package. My worry is that it's like, oh, so you incubated this game and you're just going to axe people? I don't know. So, look, that's basically where we are. Overall, this is one of those things where it's bad news, but in the same way, like in a war, you cannot win every battle. It's kind of more about your batting average. And I suppose I sort of can. I know that'll sound funny coming from an Irish person if it's, because 40% of you are Americans. Actually did play good old American baseball as a kid. But yeah, it's about your batting average. And I think that's why some projects don't end up making it, because opportunity cost dictates that it makes more sense to incur that cost on a different thing. And then we hear about it and we feel like, oh, we've been robbed of a game. When in reality, it's kind of just the normal process playing out. It's a bit weird, because sometimes I've got to try to give, for you guys, like the most level-headed analysis, even if it does rub against how I personally really feel. So it's that thing, I remember when Blizzard was making a StarCraft Battlefield game, I had one or two sources that told me that it was super cool. And for me, where two of my favorite games are StarCraft 2 and like various Battlefields, this is absolute perfection. But when I think about the overall situation that the company was in, yeah, I can't say I disagree with cancelling that project in order to get their more, you know, risk-adjusted bets like Diablo 4 into existence, or Overwatch 2. I mean, did StarCraft Battlefield really die for you, Overwatch 2? Because that makes me sad. Oh dear. Anyway, that's it for the video. We've discussed what kills projects, what makes projects, and hey, who knows, a big new premium Star Wars first-person shooter. It could actually be pretty damn cool. I mean, now that the Star Wars brand is a bit rehabbed with the likes of, well, not Kenobi, probably not Boba Fett, but Mandalorian's really good, and Andor is like, whoa, fucking incredible. So, you know, if that brand's being rehabbed, we've got Apex, or we got Respawn leading the charge of the Jedi games, which are friggin' brilliant. If they can do the same with an FPS, like, hell yeah. Star Wars used to have a really awesome, pretty special place in gaming and, you know, in the more infant years. It was pretty sad that, you know, experience that lull period. So if Respawn can lead that charge and bring us some pretty cool Star Wars content, then hey, I'm here for it. And even if I know that a pretty cool Titanfall campaign, you know, Apex thing died, then hey, well, we'll get the good games that we get. And I guess we just have to be happy with that. Let me know what you think anyway, and if you'd like to check out what we're doing, The Pale Beyond releases on February 24th, and if you'd like to help us out via the Steam algorithm, then wishlist it. It really does help. Okay, have a great day, take care, and I'll see you next time.